yourself?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
what I do first.
Yeah.
My name is Joel Joy, and today I'm here with.
My name is Terry Rosga. And- What?
Organization.
Oh, okay. My name is Terry Rosga, and I served in the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Army from years of 1962 through 1967.
Today's date.
Today's date is March 30th, March 30th, 2017. And we're in Carrollton, Texas. The interview is being held in Carrollton, Texas.
I'm just going to start off asking, where were you born?
I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
What were your parents and what were their occupations?
My parents were in Milwaukee. My mother was a homemaker, and my dad worked for A&P, a grocery store chain.
Did you attend any schools or colleges?
I graduated from Lincoln High School in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I attended the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee for a short period of time, and then I decided to join the service. At a particular time, I was having a hard time paying the bills, and I came from a very poor family, so I could not make enough to continue my college education, and I wasn't quite ready. I was like 17 years old, so I decided to go into the service, make some money and serve my country, and then do my education afterwards, which I did.
How old were you when you joined?
17.
17.
I had to have my parents sign for it.
Have you ever thought about serving in the military before, though?
Before I was 17? No.
No?
Well, that's not true. Actually, when I went to college, I joined the ROTC. I was always interested in the military. I had members of my family that had been in the military. My grandfather was in the Second World War. He was a first sergeant, and my uncle was with the 82nd Airborne.
When you enlisted into the military, did you have a specific branch in mind?
When I was in high school, I joined the Navy Reserve to make extra money. And that was the only thing that was available to me at the time. And so I went into the Navy, and I spent, and that's when my parents signed for me. Unfortunately, I didn't attend the meetings because the meetings were held quite a ways from my house. So in my senior year, the Navy Shore Patrol came to escort me for my Christmas vacation to Great Lakes for my basic training to teach me a lesson to make sure that I attended the meetings. So I did that, and I did my 9 weeks and 2 weeks. I actually got promoted and went back to Milwaukee, and decided after being on the seas for a while that I didn't like the Navy. I didn't like the uniform. It itched. It was wool. I know it sounds silly. So I went to the Navy board and told them I wanted to be in the Army. And they said, well, the Army's going to have something to offer that we don't. And so I told them I wanted to be an airborne ranger.
But when you were in the Navy, did you request a specific job?
I was working on being a medic.
Medic. Did you have any specialized skills or training that helped you get that medic?
Yes. Well, I was specialized. I was a competitive swimmer in high school. I was a water safety instructor, and I was a certified scuba diver. So the Navy was just a natural thing for me, the swimming and I was actually trained by the underwater demolition team.
When you joined the Army, how did you adapt to the military life, including physical regimen, barracks, food, social life, anything of that nature?
Well, because I had that 2 weeks of total harassment in the Navy basic training, the Army basic training, which was, 10 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks long. To me, that was easy. I was in really good shape, and when I was an athlete in high school, I ran cross-country track. I used to run 3 miles a day and swim a mile every day. So all the PT and stuff that the Army required was very easy for me.
Do you recall any of your instructors? If so, what were they like?
Well, in basic training, my instructors had come back from Korea, and they were showing me some martial arts, and I actually was in martial arts before I went into the service. So I did a thing they tell you never to do, volunteer. So during one of the hand-to-hand combat deals, and it was one of the sergeants that you're speaking of, I can't remember his name, but asked for volunteers, so I went up on the stage, and I didn't know that he was going to sucker punch me and throw me, so he did, and I stood up and I said, I don't think you can do that again, and he wasn't able to, but that got me to be able to be an assistant to him during my basic training. So I got off some of the details that we normally would have, like KP and guard duty and those kind of things. So I was able to do that, and I played in a band. So the other thing I did was I was able to do the bass drum, the marching, and all that. So I was pretty fortunate. I figured things out pretty quick.
Just gonna talk about your wartime service. Where exactly did you serve?
I served during the war. I served in Vietnam from 65 to 67. But prior to that, after basic training, I went to a specialized school at Fort Devens for 27 weeks. And after that, they sent me to Korea. So I spent 13 months in Korea, came back to Fort Walters, Texas. And from Fort Walters, Texas, they sent me a number of new people from school for me to train before we went overseas. Trained them for Vietnam. They considered me to be a veteran because I was in Korea, so I worked with those people, and I ended up volunteering to go to Vietnam to stay with the group that I trained.
What were some memories of that experience when you served abroad?
Well, when I was in Korea to start with, I was very young, I guess probably 18, 19, and Korea, as you may or may not know, it was overrun like, I don't know, 3 times. So there were no trees or forests or anything like that. There was one paved road. Everything was mud. They had one paved road they called the military supply route, MSR. And I landed on an airport that had weeds growing off the concrete. And they were using human waste as fertilizer. So it took me about 6 months to get used to the aroma, and all the streets were mud. The huts were made out of tin and paper, no running water, no flush toilets, no lights at night, no power, and we could not eat off post. And they had encephalitis. There were thousands of people would die every year from mosquito bites, so we had to take lots of pills and lots of shots. So when I left Korea and I went to Vietnam, even though it was a hot war and the bullets were flying, it was a beautiful country because it was flush with vegetation, rubber tree plants, and so forth. It was a beautiful country to land in. It's just, unfortunately, there was a war going on. But it was quite an experience. It took me a long time to get used to it when I got to Korea. And then again when I went to Vietnam, because it was a beautiful country. Unfortunately, it was during the wartime.
Were you ever on the front lines?
Yes.
Can you ever explain some of the combat action that you witnessed?
No.
No? What were the recreation you did when you were off duty?
Drink.
Drink.
No, well, that is true. I think of every soldier, but I played a little football and all that. And chess, played a lot of chess, played a lot of cards at night. I worked with a group that we had to work 24/7, so we had tricks, what we call tricks, so they were 8-hour tricks. But when I was in Vietnam, I worked no less than 12 hours. I typically got up at 5 in the morning and I didn't stop until 2 o'clock the next morning. Slept maybe 3-4 hours. And when I say I was on the front line, I was all over Vietnam. I had my MLS required me to travel to different areas, and I had to be close to the enemy to do what I was doing. So yes, I saw a lot of frontline stuff and some very horrible things. There's nothing nice about a war. It's very ugly and horrifying. And I can tell you some stories that probably make you sick, and I don't even want to go there at the moment.
Um, how did you stay in touch with family and friends back home?
Letters.
Letters?
Back in my day, that was the only thing you could do.
Did you write often?
Yes, often as I could.
Did you make any friendships and camaraderie while serving?
Yes, I did.
Do you remember with whom?
Yes, I do. In fact, I'm in the process of trying to find them. Unfortunately, we were a small unit, and we were scattered to the 4 points of the world, I guess, afterwards. And I have found people that did the same kind of thing that I was doing, and I belong to an organization, and we have a reunion once a year. I have yet to find anybody that I actually served with, either in Korea or Vietnam. I did find some people that knew of me, but I did not know them. But I do belong to a number of veteran organizations.
Can you tell me about any of your commanding officers?
In what respect?
In any stories or?
Nope.
Nope.
Well, I have to explain. The reason I say that is I had a specific type of job, and I was a team leader of that team, so I very rarely saw any of my commanding officers. In fact, the guy that was my OIC, my officer in charge of my unit, actually went to class with me, went to school with me at Fort Devens. He went on to OCS while I went over to Korea. We met up in Vietnam. So, in my particular case, officers generally were not allowed to leave the post, so they did not go. Typically, did not go out in the field, and I was in the field all the time.
What was the weather like where you were at?
In Vietnam?
Yeah.
I landed during the monsoon season, and it was raining so hard I could not put up my pump tent. I couldn't keep the stakes in the mud. I finally gave up, and the tent just collapsed on me till morning. It was total mud up to your ankles. Rained. In fact, you could set your watch by. You could set your watch by every time it rained. You knew exactly when it was going to rain. So there were the monsoon seasons were terrible. Mosquitoes. All the time I was in Vietnam, I slept in a tent. My bed was a cot with a rubber mattress with mosquito netting.
How did you receive news about wartime, like war-specific incidences of war?
I knew what was going on.
Yeah.
The nature of my job, kept me informed as to what was going on in my area and what the missions were, who was doing what, on both sides.
Did you have any contact with the civilians, and how did they treat you?
Yes, we actually ran an orphanage outside of our compound on our free time, and they treated us really well. And we adopted a number of foster children, put them in the orphanage, and we supported that orphanage the entire time I was in Vietnam.
Where were you when the war ended?
Where was I when the war ended? 1975. I was working for the city of Dallas. I was in operations. I was a network services manager.
How did you return home?
I mean, how did I physically return home?
Yeah. How did you...
I flew back out of, they flew me out of Saigon on a commercial jet now, which was different. When we went over as a unit. So we went by train, and then we were on a ship for 22 days on an equator to get to Vietnam. It was a trip ship. We had the Marines with us as well as Army. And on the way back, I was able to fly a commercial airline. and they sent me to Fort Huachuca, Arizona, for my last couple months to get back into civilization. The one thing, by the way, I'll just make a statement, one thing the Army failed to do and still fails to do is that they do not have a program to indoctrinate soldiers from combat zones back into civilian life that works well. So we have a lot of people that are suffering from a number of issues.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
It wasn't easy. Fortunately for me, when I came back, I had a few months over in Fort Huachuca to reorientate myself into civilian life from the military life. So I was used to go back to, get ready to go back into civilian life. The training that I had from the Army was somewhat easy for me to equate it to a job in civilian life, basically computers, electronics. So it was easier for me to do that than it was for most soldiers. I was not like a rifleman or an artillery guy or something.